mind control in today's society. Our guest, former Moonie and cult expert Steve Hassan. He is the author of Combating Mind Control, and clinical social worker Arnold Markowitz, director of the Cult Hotline and Clinic. Let's go to our phones and get back then to some further questions. Doreen from San Francisco with us now. Hello, Doreen.
Hi. I just wanted to state that I used to work for a positive motivated seminar, and I feel they're just like a cult in as how they get you on to go to higher seminars. I used to enroll people to go into the more advanced seminar, and it is somewhat like mind control, because they feed you the line that if you're committed to yourself, you'll do this, and it only costs $850, or the next one was $2,500, and they get you by guilt.
Right. Which group was it? Which group did you work for?
PSI seminars.
Okay, now is that something you're familiar? Arnold is smiling, so maybe have you had some experience with this, Arnold?
Well, I think that group is particularly a West Coast organization. And but what I did hear the young woman say is that they work on her guilt, and also they have this promise of personal growth. And they appeal to you saying, well, you want to improve yourself. You want to do something good for the world. So they're constantly playing on a person's desire to do better, their altruism, and perhaps their guilt. The other thing I'd like to ask the young woman if they asked her to volunteer her services a great deal of the time, which is typical of those organizations. Basically, they make their people into free labor.
Yeah. Right. Well, Stephen, we'll have you. Stephen, if I may, let's go forward, and I'll have you make your comments in just a moment. I'd like to get as many audience calls if I can at the moment. Let's go to Don in Utah. Hello, Don.
Hello. I'd like to address this question to both of your guests. I have been a member for most of my life of an organization here in Utah that's called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church. I've studied it a great deal, and I'm now studying other religious movements. And as I have heard your statements about what cults are and how cults operate, there are a lot of these characteristics that you have described that are very similar to this church. It's called the Mormon Church. It has many cult-like aspects.
Stephen, you want to respond to that?
To be honest, I am aware that there was a good PBS special emphasizing the missionary training that the young people are put through, that when I saw it, it was classic mind control, similar to my own experience in the Moonies, although not the deceptive element in terms of recruiting people in. But I'm learning. I'm open to meeting former members of the Mormons. Until about 3 years ago, I didn't think the Jehovah's Witnesses were a mind-controlled cult, but I've since been taught otherwise by former long-term leaders of that organization. So I'm open to learning about that one myself.
Okay, let's go to Mark in California. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Sonia. Hi.
Yes.
I was a member of a cult for a couple of years, and I would like the guests to comment on, first of all, cults as a business. The point is that cults, many of them, I believe, are not in operation for the purposes of enlightenment. They're in operation for the purposes of some very few people making a whole lot of money.
And Arnold, has that been your experience?
Yes, I would agree with the call. I believe that the cult leaders are into it for the money and power, for the self-aggrandizement. We know that these groups have multi-million-dollar holdings, and they use their members for the various businesses and industries for which they usually don't pay them.
But I would also add that there are many smaller groups with 2 or 3 people in it, where the leader is not in it for the money, but is in it indeed for the power. And that many of these organizations, ranging from this very small to the multi-million-dollar international conglomerates, are going after not just the 18 to 25-year-olds like it was 10 years ago, but now they're targeting middle-aged people and elderly as well. So everyone is vulnerable to mind control. And they're looking for the cream of the crop. They're looking for intelligent, bright, idealistic, productive, creative people. They don't want people
Stephen, let me just stop you for a minute. You have really tuned me into something that we have talked about in many ways on this program, whether it is the elderly, and there are people who try to exploit them. That's in the papers all the time. Battered women will tell you how the man really loves her and she has to stay. College kids who are looking, seeking. I mean, most of us are really seekers, trying to find something that's going to make our life better. Now, how do you confront somebody when they deny that they are in the midst of this kind of dependency and you see their life going down the tube?
So you're talking about if a friend or relative gets involved with one of these groups?
Yes,
what do you say?
yes.
Well, that's what I have about 4 chapters in my book about specifically. What you don't want to do is get hysterical and confront them and say, ah, you're in a cult, you're being brainwashed, because that will just propel them further away from you and into the group. What you want to do is adopt a curious yet concerned posture, contact former members, get information, get prepared, and approach it as if you were interested in learning more about the group. Ultimately, you want to try to get the person away from the organization for several days, sit them down with some former members and someone like myself who's a mental health professional to go over the information about what is mind control and what is this group all about. There are many of these groups that say, oh, we're not a philosophy, we're not a religion, we're not a lifestyle, but when you peel back all the layers of PR, they really do have a belief system, and they're putting it inside people. For example, that you are God and that you create your own reality. And I believe if people want to believe that, they should freely choose that. But you shouldn't tell someone, oh, we're not a religion, and then put them in a hypnotic trance and program them with that belief, because it can have disastrous results.
Let's move on and let's go to Greg in California. Hello, Greg.
Hi. My question is, well, I listened to your descriptive analysis of cults. I'm in the military, and you described exactly what goes on in the military. What's the difference?
Well, I think that you hit on a very important point, and it's a point that I've raised in my book. We know the intelligence agencies of our country and other countries, as well as the military intelligence, has been doing research into mind control for decades. And when you analyze boot camp training, it uses many of these techniques in a row. So the question comes to me, why doesn't someone from the administration make a public statement to our citizens and say, mind control is a possibility and it can be useful to help train people to become more successful athletes or soldiers if the locus of control is within themselves and there's no hidden agenda. And it can be used and abused by organizations purporting to be religions and undermining people's independence.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll go on to Chris in California now. Hello, Chris.
Yes. I had a question about Dianetics. In particular, about 5 years ago, I had had experience with Dianetics, and after going to only about 2 introductory classes and just beginning to take a look at Dianetics, I was actually asked to take some classes towards becoming somewhat of a minister for Dianetics, and actually asked to sign a contract which stated that they would have, somewhat of a control over who I'd talk with, meet, etc. And if I was to talk with certain former members on this written contract, it stated this, that there would be some element of control involved with that.
Arnold, let me ask you to respond. Is this a familiar theme for you?
Oh, it's very familiar and very common. Dianetics is the lead-in piece of work for the Church of Scientology, which is generally regarded to be perhaps one of the most major cult groups in the United States, and also very destructive. Also, in some of their contracts, they ask people to sign a contract that they will keep secret whatever goes on in the group, and not only do you keep it secret for this lifetime, but for all of your successive lifetimes up to 500,000 years.
Right. Now, let me stop you. Steve, I have one last question for you that I would like to ask. Oftentimes, when we run segments like this, when we have speakers such as yourself, there is a tremendous backlash from any groups that have been mentioned. People then get intimidated. Even the individual themselves starting to speak out starts to feel they may have made some terrible mistake. How do you stand up to that when that begins to occur?
Well, all I can say is that if an organization is a good organization and a legitimate organization, then it will stand any scrutiny and any exposure of information from former members or not. I've been harassed in the 13 years since I left the Moon organization. I have had death threats against myself, but I will not be silent because this is a real problem. And it's affecting millions of people in this country and all around the world. Let's look at China and Russia. These are mind control techniques that are being used on people to imprison them.
Well, you certainly have given us a great deal to think about. I thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you, Sonia.